Welcome to my happy place. This is literally a show about me enjoying the things that I enjoy just all by myself. And today I'm going to be talking about BBSing. I love retro things. I love retro computing. I just do. I'm an old fuddy-duddy like that. It's who I am on the inside. And what I want to talk about today is classic BBSing, the thing that many of us knew and loved in the 80s and 90s, where you had an old modem and you dialed using an plain old telephone copper line into someone else's computer to use it, to enjoy it, to connect to it, and to transfer files, play games, send messages to each other. Before we had the internet, we had BBSs, electronic bulletin board systems, and it was so much fun. In fact, it's so much fun and such a big part of my life. I run a BBS nowadays, and many of you will think, Brian, that's craziness. What the hell are you doing? Well, yes, I run a BBS nowadays. I call it the House of Lunduke BBS because I like putting my name on things. And it's accessible via Telnet because obviously people aren't going to go around with, old 56K modems and whatnot, dialing over plain old telephone lines, connecting up to existing bulletin boards anymore. And I obviously want to be able to play with people all over the internet. So what a lot of people do nowadays is they have their BBSs that would be connecting via an old telephone line online and accessible via Telnet, which is the world's least secure messaging protocol, basically internet protocol. But this is BBSing. This is for fun. It's for playing these old games and whatnot. So it works. So what I wanted to do today is literally walk you guys through BBSing. And I'm going to have a few follow-up videos on this, how to play a couple of the classic games, because some of the games for old BBSing are friggin' awesome, are absolutely spectacular. Legend of the Red Dragon, Trade Wars, so many games are just absolutely a ton of fun. And my personal BBS doesn't have files you can download. It doesn't have message forms that really get all that much use. It's not interconnected with other BBSs, but it focuses on games. But I'm gonna walk you through BBSing in general. Now, the first thing, if you want to experience what BBSs were like back in the old days, is you need to get a BBS client. If you have Telnet on your machine, like if you've got a Linux or Unixy machine or a Windows or Mac machine where you've installed a Telnet client, you'll be able to Telnet into a BBS. For instance, mine is bbs.lunduke.com is the domain on port 23. Port 23 is the standard port for Telnet BBSs. It's just kind of the way it was. So, but in order to really enjoy the graphics such as they were for BBSs, to see how it was back in the 90s, back in the 80s, to enjoy these systems, you really need to get a BBS client. My personal recommendation is one called SyncTerm. If you just do a search through your favorite search engine for SyncTerm, you'll find a package for whatever operating system you run, and that's a fantastic one. Netrunner, there's a whole bunch of other ones out there. I recommend SyncTerm. That's the one that you're seeing right here. It's the nicest looking, in my opinion. It really kind of accurately represents what things were like back in the 90s. I like it a lot. Codem or Kyodem, QODEM, is also another good one for Unix-based systems. It runs in the terminal. It's got a few rendering issues, but it looks still pretty good. So we're going to use SyncTerm to connect to the House of Lunduke BBS. So here we go. So first thing you'll notice is we're connecting on line number 7. This is the login page for the House of Lunduke BBS looks like. And this is pretty standard. BBSs used predominantly ANSI graphics. And what is ANSI? ANSI is essentially ASCII, only with color codes, flashing color text, and in some cases there was also music, ANSI noises as well that it could make. And so most BBSs utilized a form of ANSI for all the graphics. So you basically get ASCII art on full colorized, and it's just glorious. Now, this particular BBS, I'm going to create a new user here, is freely accessible to everyone. Most BBSs that you're going to find out there, and there's not all that many of them, but the ones that you do find, they usually are freely accessible. You can create a new user account on them. I have kept this system as stock as I could. This is what the user experience was like back in the 90s. You had to fill out, your own handles, and you had to type in all of your contact information in order to use the BBS. I've kept that in place, even though I don't necessarily need people to type in their full mailing address. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a handle. We're going to create a user account here. I'm going to call this guy just Mr. Cool. All right, so I'm going to be known as Mr. Cool on the BBS. And my full real name is Mr. Cool. Check that out. I'm being really original. And I live on number 1 Cool as Heck Street. All right, there we go. And I live in Cool Town. And what state do I live in? If I live in a cool town, you know what? I live in Cool Town, California. That's right. Well, my zip code is, let's go with 37337. Sure, why not? Let's do that. And then my phone number is... that's definitely my phone number. I'm sure that is right there. Data line. There we go. There's my data phone number. All right. So now with all that out of the way, and if you are logging into this particular system, just enter gibberish for the address and whatnot. Theoretically, I could have changed that, so it just asks for like an email address or something, but I really wanted to keep it how it used to be. And it used to be that you had to actually enter your data phone number. And what that was used for was something called verification. So what would happen was you would call into a BBS, you would create a new user account, and you would enter what your data phone number was, the phone number that you were calling them from. And then at some point, it would ask you to verify who you were using what was called a callback verification. And that callback verification basically would say, you'd say, okay, call me back and verify that I am who I say I am. It would then hang up on you, and that BBS that you just called would ring your phone number. And so your phone would start ringing, and then you would have to type in a command into your terminal to answer it. And then it would say, hey, enter your password to prove you are who you say you are. And then you'd be good to go. It's a lot like nowadays when you create an account and you get like a link sent to your email address, and you have to click the link and then enter your password to verify that your email was really you. This is how it was back then. All right, so how many lines can your screen display? 24. 24 is the standard. So I'm just going to hit enter. Now I got to create my password. I'm just going to say this is my password. My password is Mr. Cool. My password is Mr. Cool. You guys are all seeing that? I'm going to delete that after I create this. So Mr. Cool is my password. All right, what month was I born? I was born on January 1st in the year 1909. Yep, that's me. I'm Mr. Cool. All right, do I want to change my account settings before proceeding? Sure, why not? Let's go ahead and see what that is. Now, I'm going to explain a few of these things here. First and foremost is my video mode. It currently says ANSI, and that's what I want. And here's the various options you've got. And this is really interesting. First one is ASCII. If I choose ASCII, I'm just not going to get any of those ANSI graphics. So basically, I'm going to have a black and white, very simple ASCII terminal. ANSI is the way to go. ANSI Enhanced is just basically an additional set of enhancements on top of that, which I don't believe SyncTerm fully supports. RIP graphics. RIP is a remote imaging protocol that is a vector-based protocol. This was really, really kick-ass in the 90s. If you connected to a BBS that had RIP graphics, man, you could do all sorts of crazy stuff, but very few games or BBSs really used it. And then the virtual Windows client was a Windows client that connected to this BBS. But we're going to stick with the ANSI graphics because that's how it should be. Page breaks are set to 24, which basically means there's 24 lines on your terminal screen, which is generally how it was. We're going to ignore all the rest of it for now because really none of the rest of it matters a whole heck of a lot. All right, so here we go. This is when you log into your BBS, you get a stats screen. This is a statistics screen that shows you how many calls there have been today. And this BBS has gotten 49 calls today over the last, however many hours have been today. 15, 16 hours in the day. And then if you go down to the bottom of the screen, it says active, and it says 388. That's 388 minutes of active use time. So people have called in and spent 388 minutes playing games, roughly. So that's pretty good. And really what we're talking about is an old school BBS here. So that's 49 people calling in to play games that haven't been updated in decades, which is pretty cool. You have one new mail now. Do you want to read your mail? All right. Last 5 callers. I can see all the people that have logged in. Now here's kind of an interesting tidbit. If you look over on the right-hand side, it says ch stands for channel and then a number. Now, in the old days, in order to log into a BBS, you needed to have a modem, right? And if I have a BBS up and running and I have a modem, that means I have one modem, one phone line, one person can call at a time. It's very limiting. This literally means if you're trying to call a BBS and someone else is calling you right then, is already logged into the BBS, it'll just be a busy signal. You just won't, you have to wait. You just keep retrying until the phone line's not busy anymore. In fact, old BBS software used to have an auto retry command. As soon as it hits a busy signal, hangs up, waits 5 seconds, it calls again. And every time it hits a busy signal, it keeps on going at it and trying. And that's how it was in the old days. Now with Telnet, because I have a really big server running, not a really big server, compared to the old days, it's a big server, running this BBS, I have 20 lines. So that means that 20 people can be logged in at any given time, and I don't need any modems for that. I don't need 20 old phone lines and old modems all hooked up via a bunch of COM ports in order to get this up and running. I can just let people log in via Telnet. So that tells you which channel people are logged in at. The channel 9 there you see someone logged in at. That means at that point that they called channels 1 through 8, also known as lines 1 through 8 or node 1 through 8, we're busy at that point. So it rolled them up to the next possible one. So read your mail now. Yes. What sort of mail do I have? I'm going to hit N for new. Oh, look, I got a message from myself. Welcome, new user. Well, I want to check that out. Welcome to this BBS. It's a really cool thing. Lots of games from the 80s and 90s, blah, 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 blah. From myself. All right, I'm just going to hit D to go ahead and delete that. We'll just move on. All right, here we are. This is the main menu of a BBS. And many BBSs are far more complicated than mine. Mine is a very simple BBS that's focused entirely on these really, really old games, right? So you look at the left-hand side and it says on the menu, not games, and the right-hand side is games. I focus on games. In fact, most old BBSs, they would have a separate door game menu. Now, what is a door game? Aha! A game on a BBS is a separate program. So in this case, this BBS is running under DOS. Yes, DOS, right? Now, the BBS software is a DOS executable. In order for me to play the games, what happens is this program exits. My BBS program literally quits completely and then writes to a little file. And that little file says, this is the user that wants to run a piece of software. This is what COM port they're on, what modem they're using, what telnet port, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then launches a batch file, I kid you not, to launch the individual games. So for instance, that top game there, Trade Wars. If I hit that Trade Wars key, it closes down the entire BBS, writes to a file, and that file is called a door file or a drop file. In this case, my BBS uses something called door.sys. No joke. And it writes in there only a couple lines of text, a few little bits of information about myself, launches that game, that door game. And when that game is done running, it exits, relaunches the BBS and gets me back into the BBS and keeps running it. So really, it's just swapping out between different executables, which is really interesting. So here, we're not going to go into the game at the moment, but I'm going to hit T to launch Trade Wars. Boom, and see it popped into Trade Wars. So that's pretty cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and exit to hop out of that momentarily. All right, so let's avoid the games for the moment and let's hop over to messages. This is the messaging menu. I hit M, headed over to the messages. You notice I'm not using my mouse at all because this is old school. We use keyboard round here, son. Very, very simple. You can select your topic group. There's one main topic group. You can select your message base. Think of this if you use a forum like PHPBB or various other web-based forums. These are like the top-level forum categories and the individual sub-forums. And you'll notice there's only a couple of posts here. There's sections sub bases essentially for each of the games, and then there's a general one, and I can just choose the general one and just scan some of those messages. You see the top post, what year is this? That's about right. And that's really straightforward. It's very, very, very simple. I don't use this very much within the BBS because, again, I utilize mostly games. BBS is really about games. So I don't use it much. Now, in the old days, pre-internet, back when it was dial-up, this was how people could communicate. This was our message boards. This was why these were called bulletin board systems. And if you had a BBS that had just one modem and one phone line, which is something that I had. I had in my bedroom when I was in high school a single modem and a single phone line, and only one person could be on at any time. If I wanted to be able to send messages, public messages on these forums that other people could read, if I wanted to have a conversation, if I wanted to send email between different BBSs running potentially all around the world, what I utilized was a messaging network. And the most common of that was known as FidoNet back in the day. It was this big, broad, sweeping message network of individual BBSs, some of them very small, like my little one I had when I was a kid, and some that were big that had, dozens and dozens of modems and phone lines and concurrent users. But it went all over the world. And what would happen is every night or every so many hours, my BBS would call another BBS that we had already set up with each other and say, hey, got any new messages? Here, I got some new messages. And it would basically exchange packets of messages between each other's BBSs. And so those packets of messages would kind of slowly percolate between all the BBSs that were connected among FidoNet or VirtualNet or any of the other various BBS networks that were out there. And you could even create your own. You could have a BBS network between just two BBSs that were just hobbies that people ran out of their bedrooms. It was wonderful. But if I post a message to mine, it was very possible that another BBS would be multiple connections away, 5, 6 connections away. And in order for my messages that I post on my system to get to a BBS in Tallahassee, Florida, without a bunch of long distance charges, because remember, we're not using the internet here. We're calling on the old style phone systems, which means long distance charges if you're calling outside of your area code. What would end up happening is you'd be hopping between BBSs that just moved one at a time, little bit at a time, down the coasts of Western Washington and Oregon and California and slowly across the country until you hit BBSs that a bunch of systems logged into, and it would just disseminate there. And a lot of times it would take days in some cases for a message you post to reach the other side of the world or the other side of the country. But it was still amazing that we had that. It was really, really cool back then. Now, files. You'll notice here, I don't even have a files menu. But files work much the same way as messages do. You have basically groups and categories. Think of it sort of like logging into an FTP server. You have folders with files in them, and they're kind of arranged certain ways. Usually nowadays, if a BBS has files, they're going to be BBS oriented files, because there's so many better ways to download files nowadays than over throttled telnet through a BBS package. So how does file download work though? So there's file download protocols that these BBSs employ. The most common are X modem, Y modem, and Z modem. Z modem kind of being the end-all, be-all of file transfers on BBSs, and that kind of exists to this day. Most telnet BBS programs that implement some form of file transfer use what's called the Z modem protocol. And again, I could have files up on my BBS. I choose not to because it's just so much easier to go to a web page and click a link and download. It's going to be faster. It's going to be easier. It's just a little bit quicker. It makes things much more accessible to people. But we didn't have that back then. we had these text screens to go sort around. And when you were downloading a file, that's all you were doing. Because if you were using a 2400 baud modem, it's going to take to download one executable, one old shareware game, Commander Keen or Wolfenstein or something, was going to take possibly several hours to download, and you weren't doing anything. You weren't multitasking. A little screen will pop up with your progress bar, and you just wait. You just sit there and wait. It was absolutely friggin' delightful. All right, so this is what those BBSs are. Now, my BBS allows people to be online for 2 hours at a time because, I don't know, that just seemed like a good way to go. Other BBSs are different. There's a lot of BBSs that are out there. If you just search for BBS list, you can find other Telnet accessible BBSs. And the next series of videos I do, which I'm going to record right now and then release over the course of the week, I will show you how to play some of these games. And some of these games are truly amazing. These are the games that influence the games of today. These are massively multiplayer, role-playing, strategy, and the like games. They're truly absolutely fantastic. And I think if you are into video games and you've never played some of these old BBS games, these old BBS door games, you're absolutely missing out. They're truly phenomenal. 3D graphics, no. No. Good high-res 2D graphics, no. We're not even talking NES style here, guys. We're talking really not that dissimilar to, say, Atari 2600 graphics in what you're going to be visually seeing. Blocks on the screen, characters on the screen. It's text, man. ANSI is text, and that is really just the way it's going to be. All right, so that is what BBSing is, and it is absolutely friggin' delightful, and I hope you truly enjoy it. Please feel free to log into mine or other BBSs, poke around, see what it was like using the internet of yesteryear. It was absolutely an amazing time. It was an amazing time to build a community. Many of the BBSs that were out there were for local regional areas. That's where most of them were for. And in them, you get to meet local nerds. It wasn't uncommon for a group of people that use one BBS to come up with a monthly pizza night where everyone goes and hangs out at a pizza parlor. Back when pizza parlors all had video games and arcades that were decent, and you can go play Pac-Man on them. It was fantastic. They'd all get together, and a bunch of computer nerds would get together in real life, and it created communities, and it was truly amazing. And honestly, there's really nothing quite like this nowadays. There are some analogs, but not quite. Not quite. It's a big thing we're missing nowadays. And it's hard to recreate that whole experience, but we can still play the games. So that's all for today, or not today. This particular video, that's my happy place. This is my happy place. BBSs are my happy place.